Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 56th Chicago International Film Festival's Q&A for the Shorts 4 program. These are the documentary films that you just watched. We're very excited to welcome a number of the directors and the filmmakers from the program here today. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Kanas, why don't you start? Introduce yourself and say maybe a few words about your film.
Yeah, hello, I'm Kanas. I'm from Hong Kong. The film Comrades is made by me and my production team. And actually, we filmed this documentary last year, the July of 28th. That's the day that we filmed the whole protest, the movement of Hong Kong last year until now. But that day was so make me feel touched and moved because the protesters don't know each other, but they act like comrades, they help each other. So we want to represent this more emotion into the big screen. Though it is on virtual film festival now, but I think you can really feel it from your computer, microphones and devices to know what's happening in the protest scene.
Great. And Carmine, could you introduce yourself and say a few words about When, Two, or Three?
So my name is Carmine. I directed When, Two, or Three, which is the portrait of the small Pentecostal church in Baghdad, Arizona. I filmed it about a year ago, and that's all there is to say right now.
And Chris and Jamie, could you guys introduce yourselves and say a bit about Huntsville Station?
Sure, I'm Chris Filippone. I'm one of the directors of Huntsville Station, the film you just watched, documenting sort of the daily inmate release of parolees in Huntsville, Texas, in a prison there at the Greyhound station.
And I'm Jamie Meltzer. I'm one of the directors of the film Huntsville Station as well. We made the film before the pandemic in terms of the production of it, and it has been an interesting time to kind of release the film and see its resonance in this time, which I think it's kind of taken on additional meanings that kind of were a little bit in there, but the pandemic and then the uprisings and the general upheavals have really kind of brought into relief, and it's been exciting to see that the film is kind of resonating more and more. Yeah.
Great, and I'll start by asking just a question for everyone, and so whoever wants to jump in with an answer, can you just talk a bit about like the beginnings of the film, the genesis for the idea, or maybe how you encountered the subjects of the film? So anyone can take that to start.
So for Jamie and I had originally been just doing research and had always been interested in ideas around like freedom, catharsis, and ideas around that kind of stuff. Or those sorts of themes. And I had just been researching about reentry programs and things, and somehow came across this bus station in Texas, which was the sort of main release point or artery for parolees and inmates throughout the whole state of Texas. So, and how they sort of go to this Greyhound station. And I was just really curious about it. And I had talked with Jamie about it, who was my professor at the time. This was a couple of years ago. And Jamie, you can talk about it a little bit, but Jamie had made a feature film where he had already shot there and had seen the scene. And so, there was very little preparation that we could do going into it because we didn't know who was being released and all that. It was very much like go there, try and make this film on the spot sort of in a way, and organically sort of work through the process.
Yeah, I think the only thing to add, and I've just been reflecting about in terms of the short form and in terms of filmmaking in the short form, is one thing about this setting, it just seemed perfect for a short film because you're just kind of basically trapped with the parolees in this one bus station in this sort of purgatorial kind of space between incarceration and freedom. And it felt like we could explore a lot within a short time frame, and I think that appealed to both Chris and myself.
Okay, and Chris, you mentioned it was like it's the sort of a daily release. I question for both of you, did you shoot over multiple days, or is this just one day that is captured in the film?
Yeah, we shot over the course of, I think, 9 days total, 2 different separate trips when we went down there. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the release and everything is typically the same. The only difference is that, you know, the periods of time that we would be filming could be as little as 20 minutes. Sometimes folks would be released, they get their checks and the buses were there ready to go. And other times it would take, you know, 3 hours plus. So it varied each day, and it was just like calm, and then bam, they were released and we were just rolling. And then it was just like, oh, they're gone. Okay. It's very weird shooting circumstances, actually.
Yeah, and I think we were looking for a kind of variation in tone and in emotion, and there was a lot of variation in any given day, but it just took a certain amount of shooting days, production days, to be able to capture that kind of range of sort of like ecstatic excitement and you know, nervous energy and exhaustion and the emotional release that we were really going for. That the film, which is really very simply structured, needs to have that kind of emotional arc, I think, to work. And so it really was necessary to do these 2 trips that we did, and the 9 days. It sounds like a lot, but yeah, when you add it up, it was probably only like 1 production day, like in terms of the time that we spent with the parolees.
Thank you. Carmine, can you talk a little bit about the beginning of When 2 or 3 and how you came across this this church?
Yeah, so originally I just happened to drive through Baghdad a couple of years ago and just sort of slept in my car on the side of the road where it's a big mining road, so there's a lot of copper mining. I was really enchanted by the town, but because it's like a very small company town, it was hard to figure out how to film there at all. And then just by chance, I've been filming with a carnival over the years in Kentucky, and I was talking to one of the guys who is like ironically goes by the name Sadin, and it turned out that his grandparents were these people, Norman and Kay, and he told me about this town Baghdad, and I remembered it, and so I called them up and just drove out there from Kentucky, sort of sight unseen, and ended up staying in the area for a month. But you know, church is twice a week, and so I would hang out in the area. And then initially I thought I might film them in their houses and do a larger thing, but it became clear that it was this sort of space that was most interesting to me for a variety of reasons. And so really just putting on that sort of structural limitation of really just filming them in the church and during these experiences.
Great, and Chris and Jamie sort of mentioned that they're the Huntsville Station is like the sort of dictated the short form. Can you mentioned a larger project? At what point did you realize it was going to be a shorter piece?
I think I just filmed until I felt like I didn't need to film anymore, or I felt like I couldn't film anymore, I had to leave. You know, it felt like it had wrapped up. But the sort of central tension in it that I began to think about in the short form was that it's very much structured around, like a church sermon is already sort of structured in the way you're supposed to look at it and you're supposed to listen to it, which is, you know, directing your attention to the pastor, and thinking about how to film a space like that doesn't just sort of comply with the sort of prior structure of it. And how do you film in a space like that brings out different elements that are otherwise hidden? And so a lot of it was trying to figure out how to film in a new way in that sort of space. And so it felt like it was a project for a short.
Great, thanks. And last but not least, Kanas, could you talk a little bit about sort of deciding to make the film and sort of how the film found its structure? There we go.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Actually, this is the second documentary shot from last year about the anti-extradition law protest in Hong Kong. Yeah, this is my second one, and I made, I think, 7 till now. Yeah, because we want to make a shot because I have filmed some social movement before in 2014, the umbrella movement in Hong Kong. And I finished my features, documentary features 2 years later. And at that moment, it's a depression of Hong Kong on the political engagement. Yeah, but some audience asked me, we have watched your film already 2 years later. What should we do now? But I'm film director. I can't tell the audience, what should you do next? So this time, for example, this Comrades, we filmed it July 28th, and we finished it, the first version, and put it online at 1st of August, just 2 or 3 days later. Yeah, because we want Hong Kong people to think, what should they do next? Not by me, but they should watch what the frontier, what they are facing, what their emotion, what is their emotion, what how brutal is the police. We want the Hong Kong people to think and act now. That is why we try to make a lot of documentary shots in this period of time.
Great. Thank you. So I have another kind of general question for the group. We'll start with the Huntsville Station directors, but I want to ask about the role of the camera and how you felt your subjects responded to the camera. Specifically in Huntsville Station, it feels as though there's like a comfortability with the camera, or there's like a naturalness to it. Can you talk about, I guess, any problems you encountered, or like the relationships you had with the subjects, specifically because you were only there for such like encountering them for such a brief period of time sometimes?
Yeah, I can start. It was interesting because going down there was a level at which we didn't know if we were going to be able to make this film in some ways, because it was a kind of a question of how receptive, these folks might be just leaving prison to a camera crew. I mean, it was mostly Jamie and I, and then just a production assistant. So it was quite small. But we, and Jamie, you had worked for many years with a lot of parolees and those who had been released from prison. And it was mostly just a process of just, explaining them that we're there to kind of document the experience, sort of what we're doing. And interestingly enough, more often than not, people were just very receptive and open to the process. And I think part of it was that there was a level in which the camera and our presence invited a little bit of reflection on an experience that I think, folks aren't really allowed to sort of have those kind of reflections, at least outwardly, in the context of prison. And also, I think in some ways, and this is kind of conversely, but in some instances, I feel like we were such a small part of their moment for a lot of these guys that we were able to just be very present with them in those moments.
Yeah, I think there was just a really interesting kind of range of reactions that people had to the camera. There were definitely people who wanted nothing to do with us for sure, but that wasn't the main thing that we encountered. I think strangely, there's, as Chris was saying, there's this sort of advantage to kind of not only having this small amount of time, which I think the parolees sort of understood too. They were just going to be there for an hour or two maximum, and I think the camera kind of, and there's this sort of saying in cinema verite, like the early cinema verite films, about the camera as sort of like a tool to provoke, the subject, and it sort of creates a higher truth in a way, even as it kind of invites people to be a little bit different maybe than they would in a situation without the camera. And so I don't think anyone was performing in front of our cameras, but I agree with Chris that it invited them to think more deeply about the situation that they were in. And sometimes we would, you know, talk to someone for 45 minutes. The one person in particular who later on in the film sort of breaks down most dramatically in the film, like I think it's the second or third to last shot. You know, that was after almost an hour of us talking with him, almost doing an interview, which we didn't use any interviews in the film, but just sort of allowing him this space to reflect. It was all to build up to that, really, for that one moment of vulnerability. And then there were other people, like the man who talks about he'd been in prison for 40 years and just sort of assessing the weight of that, and sort of being buried in this emotional moment under the weight of that. He came up to us and we literally ran over, you know, to film him, but he kind of involved us rather than the other way around. So there were a lot of variations there in how people reacted to the camera, for sure.
I'm curious, have any of the parolees seen the film? Or have you not been, is there a way to be in touch with them about it?
Yeah, there's not really. I mean, we have releases from everyone, and that was something that we were very, you know, careful to do, and to approach people beforehand and to get the legal releases too. I've worked with different, you know, populations and had shot in this area before, and nobody's reached out yet. The film's been, you know, somewhat, you know, in festivals and as an op-docs on the New York Times as well now, and in a slightly shortened version. But yeah, that they haven't seen it, and we don't really know how to get in touch with them. We only know their contact as of the day that they were released, which, you know, as you can see in the film, almost none of them had phones at that time. So I think at some point we'll have to do some research and try to reach out to, you know, the most significant people that we had the most sort of sustained reactions or interactions with, and I'd love to share the film with them for sure.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I was going to say that the only way we could probably really reach them is to like mail letters to the addresses to the places that they were going initially and say, hey, can we reach out to this person? I don't know if they have I'm assuming they have a phone number now, but.
And those were all halfway houses, you know, so the parolees get out, they take the bus to Houston or Dallas. There's only two destinations. Most of them staying in halfway houses there. Some have to go to like El Paso, but it's also a halfway house there as well. And now we're almost 2 years after our first filming. I think we just passed the 2-year mark for the first production trip that we did.
Thanks. Moving to Carmine, I want to ask about the role of camera in your film and how you felt that your subjects responded to it. I mean, you're name checked in the film. They mention you as something that they're thankful for your presence, if I'm remembering correctly. But can you talk about how they responded to you being there?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of an interesting situation because like there almost always were just two people during the sermons, you know, Norman and Kay, and so just being there was like a big deal, right? Like the congregation was like 50% bigger, and so it was. I had to be very aware of how I was interacting with them, interacting with the camera, and how we talked about it, right? Because I became really interested in filming Kay's responses to the sermon, and the sort of small glints in her eye, the way that she would interact with what she was hearing. But of course, like that in a way could come off as insulting to Norm, who was speaking, right? And so trying to navigate the ethics and the sort of like social layers of that. And so we'd have a lot of conversations about what I was interested in, what they were interested in. And, you know, in a way, I think I began to learn of the way I use my body and the way I use the camera, sort of had a feedback with the energy of the sermon, with in a sense the sort of ecstatic experiences they would have, And so we would kind of feed off each other. You know, their energy would give me a sort of ecstatic energy, and then it would feed back. And there's a lot of yeah, it was to speak to the earlier point that Jamie made, the camera was clearly like a provocation and a catalyst to like different layers of experience, particularly in this case, like a sort of divine transcendent experience.
Yeah, it does kind of find this like rapturous form with the quick pans between the characters and the roof, and yeah, so it works in a very lovely way. Kanas, I want to ask you about you. So you mentioned that the sort of immediacy of your work and wanting to get it out immediately, and sort of the film being almost an act of protest itself. Can you talk about, first of all, the role of the camera and how kind of the protesters responded to you filming them, and then can you actually, and then also talk about sort of filming the way they organize themselves and sort of creating this like living organism of protests?
Actually, we didn't ask any permission from the protester. We just be in there. Actually, I think they didn't fear of us too much, although, but I can tell more about background because, yeah, most of the protesters are masked because they are afraid to being arrested because there is a authoritarian China nearby Hong Kong. Yeah, so they've covered their face. But many reporters have faced the same questions that many protesters don't want to be interviewed. So we change our way to film them. We be together with them. We feel the same fear about the tear gas. We hide ourselves behind the umbrella with them. But poorly, we just bring a paper mask at that time, but there is a lot of tear gas. Many protesters just pull us back and say, don't go to the front again. Your paper mask is so poor and you should have a gas mask. And some of them want to share the gas mask with us, but we reject it because we think that we are not in danger as dangerous as them. Yeah, and also, but at that, actually, I am not so at the frontiers with them. We are actually at the sort of backstage. Yeah, because the frontier is confronting the police, but me and my camera and my camera person and I were at the backstage. We filming how they organize, how they communicate, and also how they escape. And when they escape, how they protect each other and set the road barriers. And this touch us most because we think that they don't know each other. They even don't know who we are. They don't recognize us, whether we are reporters or documentary filmmakers, or but they just help us and want to help each other to go to a safer place. I didn't have this experience before in Hong Kong protests, so we think that is a very important moment that we should make a film to talk about it.
And I think one of the real strengths of the film is that it feels as though the protest itself is this kind of living organism that's adapting to a variety of scenarios. It feels like nobody's in charge, but everyone kind of instinctually knows to put the fire out, or to move the front line this way, or to duck into this street, or go into the bus station. It's really this kind of like very natural. It feels as though it's like this living thing. So I think it comes across because of the way you've structured it.
Yeah, we want to make the cinema become a protest scene again, to make the audience to feel it. This is how Hong Kong protests organized. It's just like water, but the workers float everywhere, and there is a lot of interactions through different rivers, something like that.
Thank you. I'm wondering, do any of you have questions for one another? If you do, feel free to fire them off. If not, that's also okay.
Actually, I would have a question to Carmine. Yeah, did I mention your name correctly? That the director of 2 or 3. Yeah, actually, I love your movie very much. Yeah, because I like your camera positions when the couples in the church, the husband and the wife, I think, the camera is so tight, the close-up is so extreme close-up on there, and the movement is very quick. But when they walk across between the 2 houses, the camera's position is an extreme wide angle, the extreme wide shot on it, and also the husband always walk faster than the woman, the wife, and the wife use, I don't know how to call that tools, just walk very, very, very slowly. I like your arrangement. How do you come up with this idea when you are filming?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it was, the sort of like contraction and expansion, the closeness and the distance. I thought of very much as sort of like, it's like the rhythm of breathing. Like we sort of have like the closeness, the tension, and then we sort of release, which is sort of how, in a way, the film ends with like maybe a bigger release of breath as we go out into the landscape, and as what is like sort of like wide tripod shot becomes destabilized, and just sort of yeah, I mean, it was just a sort of like almost like a physiological thing, just like needing a break from like the intensity of the closeness and the intimacy, and then wanting to get back to that, and just the ebb and flow.
Yeah, it is very wild for the so close interaction between them. I love it very much.
Could I actually, can I ask you just, it's like a sort of, maybe a sort of like simple and dumb question, but as I was watching the piece, the way that the people were masked, partially for the guests and also partially for, protecting identity. And I noticed that you like blurred out faces, and sometimes you blurred out faces that were slightly masked, sometimes the faces that weren't, and then other times there are faces that weren't blurred out at all. And I was curious, the choice to have some faces sort of still visible, and if those are people that you knew that didn't care about it, or if there was some other reason that happened.
Yeah, as I have mentioned before, that we finished this film, the first version of this film, 2 or 3 days after the protest. Yeah, because actually there is, if I didn't, more than 49 people have been arrested for rioting. Yeah, it's a huge, it's a huge criminal charge to them, which will be prisoned for more than up to 10 years. So we don't want our footage or our film become the evidence for the police. So when there is some criminal act that maybe make them be arrested, so we just hide it, blur their face. But some of them, we think that at that moment, even they have masked their face already. But even those, there is something that maybe those who know him will recognize him, but it is not a huge matter, because I think documentary or most of the film needs the facial expression to help the directors to express the meaning and the emotion of the characters. So we don't blur that, but we try to we don't want our documentary to become the evidence of the police. We don't want to help that, actually.
We have any other questions for one another? Okay, if not, that's okay. I'm just going to end by asking everyone what their next project is. That's often a question we get from the audience members, so I am going to ask it for them here. So why don't we start with the directors of Huntsville Station? Anything in the works?
For me, I've been editing my girlfriend, my partner's film. It's another short, just about this bus of Central American mothers who drive through Mexico every year, and they're searching for their kids who migrated north towards the U.S., but they became lost in Mexico. So they kind of go town to town, searching, showing pictures, trying to sort of track down their missing children. So we have shot that. We're in a late edit right now, sort of like a late fine cut. And I want to start like a feature doc, but I don't really know how to film right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a similar boat. I don't really know how to start some of the things that I want to start. And I have started some things early in the year. I was starting a project about a small town in the Sierras that had a very one of the oldest newspapers in California, and the newspaper was shutting down. It was just a really small town. And so I started following that story. And then a little bit after that, COVID. So I'm not sure what I can do with it. But it's been an interesting time, like to sort of reflect on one's practice. And so I'm not really feeling anxious. Usually I'd be feeling anxious about not having a project right at this moment. And I'm just sort of allowing this space for, catching ideas and holding them for whatever length of time we need to hold them until we can have the kind of intimacy and relationships with subjects that I like to have, and that most documentaries are built on.
And Carmine, how about you? What's next?
So I've been, the carnival I mentioned, it's based in Kentucky, and then goes up through rural Illinois throughout the summer. I've been filming with them on and off for a really long time. And I'm moving to nearby, like about an hour and a half from them in Nashville. And so I'm going to start really intensively filming with them. Hopefully when, the world is a little bit more, a little bit better, So.
And Kanas, how about you? What's next for you?
Yeah, actually, we have filmed for more than a year, and I'm trying to organize my footage to see whether a feature is possible for the protest. And also, I'm also thinking to make a big film about the COVID-19. Yeah, because I think this do affect the world so much. But I think I have to finish the protest film first.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for, one, sharing your film with the Chicago Film Festival and allowing us to present it to our audience. And thank all of you for being here today. It was wonderful to meet you and to talk with all of you. So appreciate your presence here.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see all your films, and it was great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.